Hey, this is Dr. Andarcia. Thank you for joining me on the Healthful Roots podcast this week. I have Alissa from Root Collective, and we're going to be talking about somatic practices and how that can help with our healing. But we'll get into the details in a second. I wanted Alissa to introduce herself and what you do to the community.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Alyssa. Um, we moved to Florida, to Sarasota, about 2 years ago this summer. And before we did that, I had a private practice that moved virtual during the pandemic up in Pennsylvania. So when we relocated to Florida, I was kind of at a crossroads of, do I continue to do psychotherapy in Florida and get licensed in Florida and maybe move back to in person and continue that one-on-one more traditional talk therapy healing route, or do I try something different? And I wasn't really sure what the different was going to be yet. I just knew I had this awareness of some gaps in the psychotherapy field and things after 6.5 years in private practice that I was identifying as roadblocks and barriers to. I worked with women predominantly, to women being able to move forward. And I specialized in anxiety and chronic stress related issues for women. And so the cool thing about it is that to a large degree, like once people were able to move out of chronic anxiety, right? And that chronic experience of being in fight or flight in the nervous system or even freeze, some other things start to open up in terms of a recognition and a realization of what we want when we're not living in survival mode, right? And then also how to help bring people out of that survival mode state with their bodies too, and not just with the talk therapy piece, right? So when we moved here, I decided, I'm not going to get licensed in Florida. I'm going to give myself a year to feel into a new modality, a new way of working with people. And if after a year it doesn't work or I'm not enjoying it, then I'll get licensed here and I'll go back to private practice. And that's kind of how it was born. And I wound up getting trained in a polyvagal lens for therapeutic yoga. And that training was an online training that was a complement to, I had already done a yoga teacher training years ago. So it was really, I wanted something that was a bridge between the world of psychotherapy and the world of yoga, because I had been trained in both. And I knew that movement and the nervous system and breath work and that it all linked together, but I didn't have the vocabulary and the full understanding of why they work so well together and which specific practices would serve which nervous system states that we are in. And that training really helped me to bridge those two worlds together. And that is what ultimately led to me creating a movement-based community class that is really focused on utilizing movement and breath and intuitive connection to sensation in the body, which is really what somatics is, to downregulate the nervous system and also have a lot of spaciousness for internal reflection, emotional release, and stress release.
Okay, that's a really good detailed explanation. And I'm just curious, when you're doing these group sessions, you're going through the movements and you're doing breath work. Uh, what happens if like someone just like has an emotional release in that moment? Like, do you talk about it or do you have them journal? Like, how does that look?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think what makes the practice so inviting is that you kind of like enter into your own world once you start moving your body, and your mat becomes like your safe space to work through whatever it is that's coming up for you. And so I would say in the year plus at this point that I've been teaching it, I haven't experienced anybody out of control in their body,
Mm.
where like I needed to intervene in some way. So I think because it's so gentle and it's so rooted in you listening to your own wisdom, I think when that happens, it's because somebody was pushed further than they were really ready to go.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the release is it's almost like re-traumatizing to a degree, like when we are pushed out of what's called like that window of tolerance and we weren't really ready to go there. The body wasn't primed or prepped to go there. It wasn't a gentle movement toward, but like a push or a thrust.
Mm-hmm.
um, that's when we have those reactions or releases that feel out of our control, and like we would need somebody to come in and help us. And so sometimes when I see those types of somatic practices online and people are like, if you're guiding yourself there and you feel resourced to be able to handle that level of a release in that moment, that's great. But sometimes when I see them happening in group settings and people like evoking that in other people, that's honestly like a little concerning to me. I think when we're guiding ourselves there and we're going and we're moving toward it incrementally, the release is very cleansing. Like people cry almost every week, but it's a resourced, like you know in that moment you have the resources to move yourself through those
Okay.
emotions. And if I see somebody getting emotional, I might just use general language for the whole class to marinate on, of like, if something's coming up for you in your body, let yourself feel it, breathe into it, move your body in a way that is asking to be moved, to kind of let it go a little bit more. But yeah, I don't think it's just a coincidence that in the over a year I've been teaching it, I haven't had that experience with
That makes sense. I hadn't thought about it like that, but that does make sense. You're just basically going as far as you can in that moment.
it.
So I do like that. And, for anybody who's listening to this and like, they're like, well, psychotherapy and like yoga, like I'm not understanding. It sounds like part of your work is just like making people feel safe enough in their body and using movement to help things move through. And I think like in a way, movement takes things away from your mind and then into your body, which
Exactly.
is better because in your mind, like it's just a mess up there sometimes. So if you're moving into the body, it makes it easier. So why is that such a crucial part of healing, like feeling safe in your body?
Hmm. Yeah, I think like we're taught from such a young age to override what our bodies are communicating to us.
Hmm.
And if we look at a newborn baby or a very young toddler, right? They cry when they need to cry, they tantrum when they need to tantrum, they're angry and everybody knows it, right? They have to go to the bathroom, they just go, right? Like if they're hungry, you know it. But society wants to shape that for these like appropriate times and appropriate places for emotional release, or to even excuse ourselves to the bathroom, or we get into the school system and the body wants to move, but the teacher says stay still. And so we're just kind of conditioned from such a young age to what I like to think of as like disconnect from the body's wisdom. And when that becomes really problematic, is that all of our emotions live in our bodies, right? And our stress response system is very connected to the body, the nervous system. And so when we are disconnected from the body and the sensations of the body and what the body's trying to communicate to us, we lose access to that. What's the word I'm looking for? Like if there was an analogy for it, it would be like a check engine light that would come on in a car to be like, hey, you're maxing yourself out, it's time to recalibrate and hit the reset button. Or, hey, you're really hurt or disappointed by this thing that happened. You really need to sit with that instead of repressing it and pushing it away and pretending like you're fine, right?
Hmm.
And so every time that we ignore what the body is trying to tell us and we override it because we think the brain knows better, we're missing out on these opportunities to let things find their natural way out. And so like the stress cycle, we need to close the loop on the stress cycle. If we get activated and we release all of those stress hormones and chemicals into our body, and then we just sit still, where is all of that going? Or if we're sitting and holding on to grief or anger and it doesn't have any outlet, we just are like wreaking havoc on our body instead. And so I think that's where I started to feel as a therapist, like there wasn't a lot of space to incorporate the body. I've always included a lot of like visualization work and sensation tracking, but there's something about movement. You can be having like a thought spiral or just really, and now I know all the science behind why this is, but from a felt experience, like we can all probably relate to feeling like we just have no clarity on something and we're just in that thought spiral, and then we go for a walk,
Mm-hmm.
we go to the gym, and suddenly it's like, oh, okay, maybe that wasn't such a big deal, or maybe I have some more clarity on this now, right? And there's all these reasons as to why that is, but I wanted to be able to invite that in to the work that I do with people.
That makes so much sense. Because I had never thought about that, right? You think about like talk therapy, and then I, with my own clients, sometimes I see it's similar. It's just like what we're doing isn't working, but it's because there's this other component that you almost can't see, right? And you can't tap into, but the person has to be able to tap into it themselves, right? Like there's certain things I can't do for them. I can't process for them. I
Mm-hmm.
can't even point certain things out without like being really triggering or sounding rude sometimes, right? So it's just like, how do you help that person guide themselves there? And that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. What you just said is guide themselves there. And I think in the world of therapy, we're trained to, and this is not to put down therapy. Like there are certain things that I would not recommend people bring to my classes, and therapy like would be the more appropriate place for that. Like when you're moving through, in addition to that, you can also be coming to my classes, and it would certainly be beneficial, but it wouldn't be in place of.
Right.
So therapy still has its place. Sometimes we need that one-on-one direct attention from somebody to like really hold space for us as we move through something. Um, but in addition to that, like there is this bit where if you really want somebody to be guided into their own wisdom and recognize like how many answers they actually have already inside of themselves, all you have to do is guide them to ground their nervous system.
Yes, because there's so many people who are outsourcing that, right? Like, give me this pill or tell me what's wrong, or, and that's not the answer. No, I mean, sometimes you can find answers that way, but not always. And I just wanted to ask you because I think that unless you know what grounded feels like, it's
Mm.
hard to like understand what we're talking about. So, what are some signs that someone's disconnected? Like when you see someone, you're like, wow, that person really needs to ground. What signs might you see?
Yeah, so I like to use the analogy that's called the polyvagal ladder. And if you were to Google it, it would be reversed from the way that I describe it. But intuitively, I just shift it. So I want to give that disclaimer. Intuitively, I shift it, which will make sense in a second why. So with the polyvagal ladder, you could visualize that you have this ladder, right? And I like to tell people, imagine that you're placing it somewhere that is grounding to you, like that feels like a place where you feel relatively calm. Maybe it's in the sand at the beach. Maybe it's in a garden. Maybe it's in a grassy field or something, right? And when you're at the base of the ladder, you have your feet planted on the earth in whatever place that is. And you feel resourced, like you feel capable, you feel flexible, you feel adaptable, you feel patient.
Hmm.
Um, there's more compassion accessible to you inwardly and towards others. And you generally just kind of feel like you can move with the rhythm of life and everything doesn't feel like this huge deal. But then life gets stressful and we start to move up the ladder. And when we move up the ladder, the first place we often find ourselves is in that fight or flight energy. And that fight or flight energy in the body feels like jitteriness. It feels like a mobilizing feeling. Like I feel like I'm always on and I can't
Hmm.
turn off. My brain won't stop spinning out, right? And I'm on this hamster wheel, or my body just feels tense, or I have this sense of this impending doom, and I just can't get past this feeling that something bad is about to happen, right? That's really being locked in a fight or flight nervous system state, which is how a lot of us would describe having an anxiety disorder, which was also
Hmm.
the thing that really was eye-opening for me as I started to do this work. Is like, we don't have to label it a disorder and surrender ourselves to this for the rest of our lives. We're just recognizing your body is locked in a fight or flight survival state, and we can guide you out of that, right? And then higher up on the ladder is freeze. And freeze is a tricky one because so many of us, myself included, can shoot right up the ladder to freeze without even realizing that we're there
Yeah.
because we dissociate, which means we disconnect. And there's people talk about dissociating in the therapy world, and it's like there's a spectrum, right? But the part that a lot of us can relate to is where we feel numb. We're
Hmm.
very disconnected from the body. It's a lack of sensation. So it feels like you're moving through life on autopilot. It feels like you're disconnected from sadness, but you're also disconnected from joy. And it's kind of like lather, rinse, repeat, you know? And then there's something called functional freeze, where to the rest of the world, you seem fine because you're still doing the things you're supposed to be doing. You're holding your responsibilities, but internally you feel like robotic and just completely disconnected, right? And so I think that's kind of the differences of what we can notice sensationally in the body between what it feels like to be grounded, what it feels like to be kind of stuck in that fight or flight energetic space, or stuck more in that freeze energetic space.
Yeah, no, that's a really good explanation. And we're going to get into how that kind of impacts hormones in a second. But I just want to mention something because I used to struggle with anxiety too. And I gave a lecture yesterday, and we were talking about pain and anxiety and things. But I think that the more time that you spend in a grounded state, or if you can learn to get yourself in a grounded state, when something does come up, at least for me, I can pause and be like, oh, I'm feeling anxious.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that coming from? And
Mm-hmm.
then sometimes I'm like, oh, that's silly. Okay. And then it like goes away because I was able to identify like where is that creeping up from? Whereas before I would react to that sensation and then you spiral, right? You're like, oh my God, I'm anxious. And then you just like go off. Right. But like this,
100%.
I think like this allows you the space to just pause and reflect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it reminds me of that sort of expression of like there's power in the pause. And so if we can feel the feeling and pause and be with it for a second, then we can realize like, okay, where is this coming from? And one of the most eye-opening things I've realized is sometimes it's not even mine. You
Yeah.
know, like sometimes we just absorb. We are transactional, relational beings. Like sometimes we are just in a room where there's a lot of dysregulation and we just absorb that. And so like it's actually so freeing once you start to even just experience regulation for a second, so that way you could notice when you shoot back up again,
Yeah.
and then you can pause and be like, what's contributing to this? And sometimes it's your own trigger, and there's so much work around unpacking those, and sometimes it's genuinely just somebody else's stuff.
Yes, I've noticed that too. If there's like music is really loud, a lot of people are really loud. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm like getting a little struggling here. But
Mm-hmm.
so what would you say? Because I think like what you do and what I do, I mean, they're connected, and I think you have to do it hand in hand, right? Like taking care of yourself, eating right, and the work that you do, it's very connected. But just for the woman who says like I don't have time, or they feel guilty resting, or they can't slow down, right? Because that's another one where like when they do slow down, they feel worse. I mean, that to me indicates that you need to actually slow down. So what would you say to that person?
Yeah, I think so many of us, myself included, when I really started this work, we just don't know how to sit with our own company without distracting ourselves in some way, whether that's like scrolling on our phones or watching TV and binge watching shows, or throwing ourselves into work, or throwing ourselves into parenting, or constantly planning the next trip or the next adventure, making plans with friends, and we all have these sort of things that we do that really have a healthy function and purpose for sure, and also sometimes can be a distraction from building a safety internally to just sit with and be comfortable with yourself. And so I think when we first start this work, we just have to give ourselves so much grace and really have very realistic expectations of what we can expect from ourselves when we try to slow down. Like, if there's one thing I learned from all of my years of private practice and all the things that I've worked on within myself and guide other people to, it's that the thing that's going to swing the pendulum the most in our own healing is our compassion levels towards ourselves and the relationship that we create with ourselves. And So at the end of the day, it's not about like, oh, I'm sitting still and I'm failing at this. Like when I have people come to class for the first time and they're like, I'm trying to ground, but my mind won't stop spinning.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, then don't hold yourself to that standard. Your body is still in fight or flight. Can that be okay? Can that be okay? And can you just move in a way, and I kind of give options, but can you move in a way that supports releasing and discharging some of that fight or flight energy from the body? And
Yeah.
then as you do, it becomes less scary and less overwhelming to just be with yourself. That's why we have Savasana at the end of a yoga
Mhm.
class and not at the beginning. We need to discharge that energy first, move ourselves down the ladder. Now I have that vocabulary for why that practice is helpful. I didn't have that when I first started yoga. I just intuitively knew it helped me.
Yeah.
And now I can say, like, okay, it's guiding you down the ladder. So by the time you're at the end of class and you're in Savasana, it might not be perfect because you might have been really high up on the ladder when you started class, but there's some level of comfort that you can
Yeah.
achieve that's a little bit more than it would have been had you not moved your body first.
Yeah, I agree. And it's all a practice. I mean, yesterday we were talking about meditation, and it was like you're not going to feel it in the first meditation session. It might actually feel awful in the first session, but you just got to give it time. And the more you do it, then the more you get used to it. And so in my practice, right, this is what I see. I see like women who are constantly tired. You mentioned wired, right? Like you're just like wired. I describe it as feeling like you're cracked out because like it's like you're tired, but you can't stop. It's like if you stop, you're just going to crash and you're not going to get back up.
Mm-hmm.
Really anxious. I see that a lot. And you know, these women usually have tried everything. They've tried supplements. They've come to me and they've tried medication for anxiety and depression, and their lab work, we can't find anything that's technically wrong, right? So then how do you how would you encourage someone to say, "Oh my gosh, sorry, I'll cut this out."
Okay.
Oh my god, cuz my mom just got this. Okay. So for the woman who's tried everything, right? And then you can see maybe that she has like hormonal imbalances, how would you in your world tell them that somatic therapy is something that can help them?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like again, it's going against the grain to a degree, like we all are conditioned to want the quick fixes and the very obvious answer, or to just kind of keep on the hamster wheel
Yeah.
and avoid. But what this really invites in is reconnecting to your body and befriending your body again. And it's a journey, like the connection I have to my body now is still vastly different than where it was 7 years ago when I started really working on this as a result of extreme postpartum anxiety that I went through. And that's kind of what helped me to really start unpacking a lot of this. Um, so it takes a lot of time. And also, it's just like each baby step towards rebuilding your relationship with your body is so much more freedom in how you can move through life, because stress is still going to find us, right?
Yes.
Like we can't control what happens outside of us. But if we can start to rebuild the relationship we have with ourselves, I like to think of it as like constantly keeping your head above the water or fighting against the current versus learning how to float. It's like the
Yeah.
waves are going to keep coming, but if you can learn how to float and just ride it out, then suddenly it feels less like this catastrophic thing and more like I feel resourced to handle this. And each time that we have a practice that guides us back to regulation, moves us down the ladder, and we can feel that moment of peace, even if it's for a second, it rewires, right? Like the neural pathways that would take us to worst case scenario. Or if you're sitting on the couch and your brain is like, it's a commercial, reach for your phone, find
Yeah.
stimulation, right? Distract. If you just, for that one time that day, you notice that and you say, you know what? Instead of doing that, I'm going to take a few deep breaths.
Yep.
Like you just rewired that desire to, okay, stillness, I'm not being distracted, let me go to my phone, and to sit with yourself for a little bit longer. And each time that we build something like that in, we're getting ourselves out of that chronic state of being escalated. And it's living in that chronic state of escalation and that survival state that so many of us live in that leads to all the hormonal issues and the
Mhm.
health issues that you then see, right? That's one reason. That's not obviously all of the reasons. But from my perspective, like where my expertise fits into what you do, like when we're living in that chronic state and we never hit the reset button and move ourselves down the ladder, like that's when we get completely depleted and
Yeah.
all of these other health issues follow. And so it's really just finding these moments to be like, okay, I'm choosing to reset versus to do all the habits I've always done before. And that doesn't mean it's going to be really easy, which is why I think having support in the form of a therapist or a community, which is what Root Collective is so beneficial and helpful because we're not meant to do it alone.
Yeah, that's actually something I was going to say is while you were talking, I was like, man, I need to send everybody to do these somatic practices because I think it's like relatively new. I didn't really know much about somatic practices until the last 2 years. But when I tell my patients, like, hey, like meditate or do breath work, right? Because it's something that it's not something that it's easy if you've never done it, right? It actually can, it takes a lot of willpower at the beginning. And I think movement is easier.
I agree.
And so that's something that I think it's great that you're doing that. And I would definitely recommend that because you're right. I think for a lot of the women that I've seen, the ones who can do the breath work or the meditation, they're coming to me with irregular periods or they're perimenopausal and all that. And once they get into like a more regulated state, sometimes their cycle comes back. Like, and we thought that she was going into menopause. I'm like, oh, you're just going to menopause. And then all of a sudden she started doing yoga and she was doing breath work and all these things. And she's like, my period hasn't been regular in 7 years. And now all of a sudden it's regular. And you're just like, wow, like that's amazing. I didn't think that was going to happen, honestly. I wasn't expecting that. But there's so much good that can come from this. And especially for people who have really tried a lot of things and they can't. I'll tell you, yesterday I tried meditating, didn't work. I was like not even breathing properly. And then today I did yoga and I was like, wow, like such a difference. And now I feel like today I could actually sit down and meditate if I wanted to because I'm not as, dysregulated or as stressed out as I was yesterday. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's just also, you said it at the beginning, but it's just like understanding that some days it's not going to be great. Some
Mm-hmm.
days you might need a different modality, but definitely I think we need to start getting our head around the idea that we do have to do something, right? Like we
Yeah.
have to do or learn a practice that's going to help us bring us down, like when we're really activated.
Yeah. And what I love about somatics, to your point, is like I had a client, for example, who was like, I know that if I just go for a run, I'm going to feel so much better. And I give this example because I think people should hear it. Like, I know if I just go for a run, I'm going to feel so much better, but I just can't get myself off the couch. And to that, I say, rather than push yourself and get off the couch, girlfriend, because you're going to feel better afterwards, like, no, that's the sort of like self hatred pushing that is not somatic, right? And so it's actually this permission to be like, okay, if I'm not ready to get off the couch and I feel so in a collapse like state that I don't even have the energy to get up, that means I'm in freeze. And so if I'm in freeze, running is a fight or flight beneficial action. That's not going to help me if I'm in freeze, right? And so it's like, how can I gently wake my body up? Because you kind of have to move down the ladder to get to grounded. So you have to move through fight or flight to get back to grounded again, right? But if you're all the way up in freeze, you need to start with really grounding practices like some gentle self massage or what's called self havening touch, where you're just kind of using a gentle like sweeping motion. It's like connecting to sensation in the body again. Then maybe you feel a little more energized and you can stretch a little bit. And then maybe you feel a little bit more energized and you can stand and go into a forward fold. And then suddenly you're like, you know what? I can at least go for a walk. So you start walking. And then as you're walking, you're like, it would feel really good to run right now.
Yeah.
And then it's authentic, right? And then you know that you are there and you're still getting the end result of feeling good at the end of it. But I think what's so amazing about this practice is that when you learn how to listen to your body, you take out all of the judgment and you're like, if I don't want to go for a run right now, it doesn't mean I have to do nothing and I have to be a total couch potato. But how can I use more practices beneficial to a freeze state rather than trying to force practices that maybe are more beneficial to a fight or flight state? Or I'm up in freeze or I'm up in fight or flight. Meditation's not going to be easy for me to access right now. I
Yeah.
need to guide myself down the ladder first. That's why, again, Savasana is at the end of a yoga practice. Like, yoga was designed before any of this science existed, which is so amazing to me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the physical practice of movement was designed so that way the sitting in stillness part would be easier,
Yes.
both physically and mentally, right? And like, that's why the physical asana practice is there. And so if you're having a hard time sitting in meditation, it's like, okay, then maybe you need a moving meditation first.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe it transitions into a seated meditation.
Yes, I love that. And so for anybody who's listening and would like to join the Root Collective, how would they do that? And what services you offer? Is it like, how does that look?
Yeah, good question. So we are based in Sarasota and it's an
Mm-hmm.
in-person community. So what that looks like is I teach this class on Friday mornings. It's an hour and a half and it includes a weekly theme. We talk about it, we journal about it, and then we move our bodies. So it's very integrative. I also teach it on Monday nights, those could be drop-ins. So that's just the Root Collective class, and you could just drop in to those classes. If you want to join the community, then that kind of takes it up a notch, and you pay a monthly membership, and you not only have access to those classes, but you have access to the community that we're forming. So we do fun, creative, grounding things each month together to build that community feeling. Because the biggest thing I felt and that clients would feel and other people felt is like, it could be really lonely to just, be working on yourself in this way and unpacking things and getting to know yourself better. And so when you can be around other people, and also like the nervous system sharing of co-regulation, if
Mm-hmm.
you're guiding your body to regulation, everybody around you is too. It's like this unspoken thing that washes over the room that makes it easier for everybody to get there versus
Yeah.
if you're just trying to do it at home. And that's why I always loved community yoga classes versus trying to practice on YouTube at home. There's something energetically about that joint experience of regulating together. Um, and so it's like borrowing each other's nervous systems, which is really cool. And then we do the fun and creative things too. So right now it's in Sarasota, it's in person. If you're listening outside of Sarasota, my goal right now is to train up other facilitators to take the Root Collective methodology into other locations. So it's not only living in Sarasota, and it can live in other places. Um, so if anyone's listening and they're really interested in this and they have this sort of background and you're interested in getting trained, definitely reach out. Or if you are living in an area and you know of somebody that you think would be so good to lead a community like this, also reach out, because it would be just like such a gift for me and so exciting to see communities like this existing elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's super important to build community. And I love that you're doing it for this reason, like this cause of just like teaching people to regulate themselves. It's so important. And I wish and I hope that by listening to this, more people are encouraged to try it, just
Mm-hmm.
because I think that, at least for me in my 20s, I didn't think I needed it, right? Like I was superwoman. And then it really hit me hard in my 30s. And so if you don't think you need it yet, I think eventually you will. So I think if you start earlier, the better. You won't have to crash. You can just, smooth sail.
Yes, exactly. And they are resources and things in your toolbox that serve you forever. You're just learning how to befriend your body and listen to what your body is saying. And it's just sort of like deconditioning from all of the stages and phases of life that have told us not to do that.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful way to end. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed this.
I did too. Thank you.